hands-on for today. But today I want to spend some time on explaining you the developer tools that are there in AWS, and and then tomorrow we'll focus more on the other tools like monitoring, config, and things like that. CloudWatch is a very, very important tool. That is something that we can see tomorrow. But today, more importantly, we will focus more on a few developer tools that AWS has got. They're going to be very, very important. Let me share my screen. So that is the first part, and also have some fun activity today. Uh, so brothers Sai Krishna and Ravi. So I've got that quiz available today. Okay.
Oh, wow. Nice. That's
Quick
nice.
10 questions. Yeah. Quick rapid fire round. Okay. It'll be a very fun exercise. But for that, I think we need more participation. Let more people join in. I think maybe towards the end of it, maybe by around say 10 o'clock, let's start the online quiz. Okay. So that's going to be a fun activity. Going to be very basic questions on AWS. Let's see who tops the leaderboard today.
Sure, no, sounds good.
Okay. So let's do one thing. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. So CLI is something that we did, cloud formation. So today what we will do is we'll actually spend some time on development tools on AWS. Okay, and then CloudWatch, Config, CloudTrail, and Systems Manager and other tools is something that I'm going to introduce to you later on. Okay, so if you actually go to aws.amazon.com, you will see under the products, you'll see developer tools. Okay, so let me just click on that. Actually, in AWS, you get a bunch of tools and developer tools which will actually help the developers. In fact, AWS helps. Sorry, just give me a second. Okay. So in AWS, you've got all the services, most of the services, so that, you don't need a physical on-premise data center, right? Like compute, storage, network, and whatnot, databases, and so on and so forth, right? Similarly, I mean, if, you need some tools to basically give it to your developers, and developers will need some tools around building their code, testing their code, deploying their code, correct, and applications into AWS, correct? So AWS has got a complete suite of services and products that can help developers and that can make life easy for developers. Developers don't have to go searching for any other tools, searching for any open source tools, or searching for any other alternatives. Okay, they just need everything in as a managed service which is available. Okay, which will help them to release software much faster, and more importantly, all these services integrate with the other AWS ecosystem of services through IAM, correct? And in fact, if you see, all these tools are being used internally by Amazon's own development teams to build software and to basically deploy the software. Okay, like all the Amazon services that you see, like Amazon.com, Amazon Pay, Alexa, Prime, right? All of those, they're all used by the Amazon Development Center themselves. Okay, so now these are all a bunch of tools that are available. Okay, so let me just go in the order of most important ones, and there are a bunch of it, about a dozen, if you see. Yeah, about more than a dozen. Okay, So the first one that I want to basically talk about is the cloud development kit. Okay, cloud development kit is a you know it's a framework that is used that developers can use to basically build your cloud based application. Okay, in fact the paradigm has changed, right? I mean, no longer enterprises spin up everything from the scratch, right, and then take multiple cycles to bring up the infrastructure, wait for several months to procure hardware and build the code and then deploy the code, right? So everything has changed. Everything is automated, and automation is there, and cloud is there. You can just go to cloud. As we saw, I mean, I'm not exaggerating. We were able to build a complete website in less than 10 minutes, correct? And deploy the website and take the website global in less than 10 minutes, correct? So yeah, we did that last week. We did S3 and CloudFront assignments over the last weeks, where we were able to actually take it live in less than 10 minutes, correct? So, so given that, cloud development kit will enable developers to basically define the cloud application resources using familiar programming languages. Okay, so now it basically gives you the ability to use like Terraform or use Python, right? And use the familiar programming language to build applications, right? And to basically provision resources and use a declarative style of programming, right? And is anyone aware of what is the declarative style of programming? What is a declarative? Okay, so research for it. Research what a declarative programming style is all about. Okay, so that's where CDK is very helpful. In fact, CDK is, I would say, the next advanced simplified version of CloudFormation. Okay, in fact, CloudFormation needs a lot of um, still needs a lot of coding, right? But CDK is not like that. Okay, CDK will simplify the way you express your AWS resources. So let's quickly see one small video of it of CDK. Just stop this screen share. Back. Okay, CDK is basically a slightly advanced topic. That's okay. You can still learn it. It's going to be quite interesting and important.
Hello, New York. Are you all right? Woo! In the next 5 minutes, I'm going to show you something that will save you hours. We're going to build a very simple application, a very straightforward application. But really, it's not about the application. It's just going to be a hello world application. The magic happens in the way that we build the infrastructure.
So this video is from, so every year what AWS does is AWS does several global events. Okay, so it's called summits. So these summits happen in every country, okay, in every region, and these summits will basically, these summits invite people from that region, and then there are evangelists and product managers, right? And the product team, services team, they speak about the new services, and they speak about the new trends, and they speak about new patterns, and so on and so forth, right? So that's where this is one of those videos from 2019 where CDK was launched around that time. Okay, so it's basically from that video. I'm just playing that.
Now, usually you might build your infrastructure using something like CloudFormation or something like Terraform, but I'm a developer, and I kind of like the power of a programming language. I've been developing my whole life, and that's what I want to create infrastructure in. So we're going to build.
I think the audio is quite low, or is it only for me? Are you all able to hear it properly? The audio?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
It's
sir.
good.
It's good? Okay, probably I think it's some issue at my end. I'm not sure.
Using TypeScript today. The actual CDK supports Java, C#, Python, TypeScript, and JavaScript at the moment. And we're going to use TypeScript to firstly create a VPC. Then we're going to create an ECS cluster. And then we're going to run ECS on Fargate on top of that cluster. And we're going to do it all in TypeScript. But first, we're going to need to install some prerequisites even, to get us started with working with the CDK. So in your IDE, we're going to go into there, and we are going to go into our command line, and we'll say npm install AWS CDK. We're going to install it globally. And this is going to start giving us.
Yeah, so if you see, he's just, see, this is primarily targeted for the developer community, CDK, right? Cloud Development Toolkit. And it's basically using Node.js, right? So it's using the npm packages to install the CDK. Okay.
There's commands that we can run on a local machine. CDK init app, we're going to choose the language type of TypeScript. So that's going to allow us to start developing our infrastructure in TypeScript. We're going to end up with a skeleton project here that's going to allow me to start building. I'm also going to need a few modules. We're going to be dealing with EC2, ECS, and we've got a patterns library for ECS as well. We can develop with any of the AWS services and create any kinds of constructs which are supported by CloudFormation using the CDK. So once we've got that stuff set up, we can start defining our infrastructure in TypeScript in this instance. So I go to my TypeScript file, and I import one of those modules, the EC2 module. And on line 8 here, I create what we call a construct for a VPC. So a new EC2 VPC, I give it a name, my app VPC, very original. And you'll see that construct is all I really need to define to create my VPC. The CDK is going to use sensible defaults. So anything that I don't specify, it's going to use sensible defaults for these things. There's one thing that I will specify, and you'll note that I'm in an IDE here. So it's telling me with code hinting and IntelliSense exactly what I can do at this stage. Now I'm interested in that max.
Yeah, so if you see this is a very familiar coding, right? I mean, unlike your CloudFormation, right? CloudFormation, obviously, you have to learn YAML, and you have to learn, JSON, right? And you have to basically build it. But here, it's like developers, it's like coding only, correct? I mean, if you see here, what he is doing is he's actually creating a Fargate app stack. Fargate is, again, a managed service. It's a container managed service. It's a containerized service. So what he's doing is, in this line, he's creating a VPC, a new EC2.VPC, this name of the VPC, comma, you get all the, in the IntelliSense gives you all the properties that a VPC can have, like CIDR range, correct? And so on and so forth, right? All this, enable DNS host names, enable DNS support is something that we saw, right? So, I mean, it gives you all of that options, like how you do programming, right? I mean, all of you have done programming, correct? Most of you have done programming, right? I mean, you have used probably built some Java programs or Python programs using an IDE. IDE is integrated development environment, right? Which will, you just type, it will autocomplete, right? If you just press dot, it will list down all the functions of a method, all the functions of a class, all the methods of a class, right? So similarly out here also, if you see, it gives you, all those features, and it's basically a good thing for developers to, deal with.
AZ property, maximum availability zones, and I'm going to set that to 2. And you'll note that code hinting works on all levels of these constructs. So you don't need to go out to a separate place to get documentation. It can all happen within the IDE. So now we're going to go and deploy that. So we're going to call CDK deploy from the terminal, and it's going to start creating our CloudFormation script and start deploying our application to AWS. So you see my VPCs starting up there. And this is a real game changer for me. I've just created a VPC in one line of code. I don't know if I actually would know how to write one of those without looking at the documentation in CloudFormation. And so it's setting up all the routing, all the subnets, all of the NAT gateways for me. All of that's configured. I didn't specify any of that. But now I have up and running a VPC in which I can work. And now we're going to start creating something inside of that VPC. So we're going to create our ECS cluster.
Yeah, you see, with a one line of code, the entire VPC is created automatically for you, right? I mean, you don't have to, log into console. You don't have to go to VPC, all of that, right? It's just single line of code. The entire VPC is created.
And again, we do a similar dance. We import the ECS module, we require it, and then we use one of these constructs for ECS, and we say we want to create a new cluster. It's going to call my app ECS cluster. We're going to point it at the VPC that we created previously. And in one line of code, we've created a cluster which is going to sit inside our VPC. Now, we can also run commands to see what the difference between the different steps that I've just made are. So we can call CDK diff, and that will show us the difference. So it just says, OK, we've got a cluster now. So I can do a CDK deploy of that, and now we should start to see our cluster popping up inside of our VPC. So now it's starting to build our application infrastructure. So what we're going to run it on. This is a container-based application, so I'm going to use ECS on Fargate. So I'm going to import one more library. This is an ECS patterns library. And this is a construct, it's a high-level construct, which is creating a load-balanced Fargate service. I'm going to give it app Fargate service, and I'll just specify a few properties. The cluster name, or the cluster which I'm going to be connecting it to. The container port that I'm going to be listing on. In this instance, it's port 3000. And then an image that I'm going to, where my container lives. Now, I could take an image from Docker Hub or ECR, or I can use this from asset, which means that the container's local on my machine. So I'm just going to point it at an app folder on my local machine, which doesn't currently exist. So now we're going to start creating that application, and it's going to be a TypeScript application. This is powerful because my infrastructure is coded in TypeScript, and I'm going to code my application in TypeScript. I'm using the same language throughout my whole development.
Yeah, so that's the beauty, right? I mean, yesterday we spoke about infra as a code, right? What is infra as a code? You're not building infrastructure, by yourself, right? I mean, where you need a lot of knowledge on the underlying infrastructure components such as compute, storage, network, and all that. Correct? You're using the same language. You know Python, or TypeScript, or Java, right? You're using the same language you're a developer, right? I mean, as a developer, you're also building the infrastructure. I mean, if you ask me, if you take me like probably 10 years back, right? I mean, there would be separate roles called infrastructure engineers, okay? Network, and within infrastructure engineers, you had network engineers, storage engineers, okay? And then capacity specialists, right? Capacity planning specialists, right? And all these people would come together to build the entire infrastructure, and the development team will be completely different. They have no clue of what's happening on the infrastructure. But now it's all gone, right? I mean, everything is one, right? You use one programming language to build your infrastructure using code, and build your application using the same code or a similar programming language. Like in this case, as he said, he's using TypeScript to build the infrastructure using CDK, and he's also going to use TypeScript to build his own application. So as a developer, he doesn't have to rely on an infrastructure engineer to build the infrastructure for him, right? He is all self-contained, right? He is like independent, right? He can do whatever he wants to do with his application, and he can deploy his own infrastructure in his VPC, okay, and then build his application and release his application. So that's the power of Cloud Development Kit. It's like one development kit which you can use it end to end.
So I'm going to create an application folder, do a little bit of an NPM dance. I'm not actually going to do a dance. And then I'm going to install Express, which is a framework for a website. We're creating websites in Node. And I'm going to create a Docker file. Now, this is a plain Docker file. There's nothing special about this Docker file. We're just going to import Node Alpine as the first layer. We're going to run npm install, and then we're going to run our TypeScript application effectively. And we've got the entry point being app.js. So we'll create app.js. It's a simple Express application. It's any GET request which comes into it, it's going to say hello world. It's just going to respond hello world, and it's going to be listening on port 3000 for those GET requests as well. So now I've created my app, my hello world application. I've created my base infrastructure. Now, because I've been using local assets there, I've got this local Docker file, I'm going to have to use a thing called CDK Bootstrap. So CDK Bootstrap is just going to upload some of those local assets to S3, and then the CDK will then be able to deploy those assets. So CDK deploy starts to do a Docker build. It's creating my container. It's bringing up my container. It's doing all the things that it needs to do to create the infrastructure for my ECS on Fargate. It's doing things. It's creating stuff. It's creating ECS flows. The load balancers now come online. Soon my containers will come online. And now users will be able to go to this URL and be able to see my container running on ECS on Fargate. So if we go to that URL, we see our beautiful Hello World application.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
See, if you see the architecture on the right side, VPC was created. Within VPC, we created an ECS cluster. ECS is nothing but an elastic container service, which uses Docker, right, to build your applications and deploy your applications, right? And then it creates a load balancer. We're going to see more about load balancer the next week. And then it created a container registry. It deployed the application, Hello World application, within the Fargate cluster. And the application user is able to actually access the application. So now this entire stack is created in less than 10 minutes, right, using CDK, right, and deployed end to end within in CDK, right? And you don't need to really log into the console, right? You just have built a code to represent the infrastructure and to build the application and deploy the application within that infrastructure, right? So that's basically the what CDK does. I would suggest, I mean, there's so much of resources available, right, for CDK, and you can just go ahead and just go to, as usual, go to resources, CDK developer guide, go to the official documentation and read this documentation, right? And so right now CDK supports like TypeScript, JavaScript, Python, Java, and C#.NET. Okay, these are the languages that it supports, which are very famous languages, right? You can use one of these languages. If you're comfortable with Java, you can use the Java version of the CDK, or if you're comfortable with C#, you can use C# version of the CDK. Okay, but with CDK, you can basically do everything on your own. Like one small example is using TypeScript, it's creating an ECS cluster and VPC. I think it's the same example that we just saw. But if you see Java, if you see, this is the Java code for that. It looks like Java, right? It looks Java-ish. This is C# code. If you want to use your Visual Studio and build it, you can just use your Visual Studio to build the code. Yeah. You can just create a small app. You can install CDK, go through this, install CDK on your laptops or desktops, configure your CDK, right, and then create your first app using CDK. Okay, there are examples here. Just go to the examples. Yeah, creating a serverless application using the AWS CDK, right? How do you create a Lambda function API gateway S3 bucket? In fact, we're going to see this in our next week, last week. where last week is about building serverless applications on AWS, where we are going to see about Lambda API gateway and all of that. But yeah, you can also build it using CDK. It'll be quite fun, and you can learn about CDK. But remember, I mean, even if you don't get an opportunity to go dive deep into CDK and learn CDK to a good extent, for now, just understand that CDK is cloud development kit, which helps build applications on AWS using any of the familiar programming languages, and you don't have to worry about anything. You don't have to build the infrastructure. You don't have to use CloudFormation, or you don't have to use anything else. You can just use CDK to build end to end using one single code. Okay, that's what CDK is all about. Okay, and then Cloud9. Okay, Cloud9 is basically it's a development environment. It's an integrated development environment on AWS. Let me quickly bring up my Cloud9 environment. Just give me a second. It's a browser-based integrated development environment. You do everything in browser. You don't need a Visual Studio. You don't need anything. You write code. Yeah, hey, somebody has to go on mute, please.
Sir, can't see any screen.
Yeah, I'm just bringing it up. Just give me a second. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is to basically build a Cloud9 environment in my account. So what is Cloud9? Cloud9 is a cloud-based IDE, integrated development environment, that lets you write, run, and debug your code with just a browser. It includes a code editor, debugger, and terminal. Cloud9 comes pre-packaged with essential tools for popular programming languages, JavaScript, Python, PHP, and more. So you don't need to install files or configure your development machine to start new projects. Since it is cloud-based, you can work from anywhere, right? I mean, you just need an internet access. As long as you have internet access, you can work from anywhere, right? It also enables you to build serverless applications, right? And you can share your development environment with your team and do all of that, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, so what does the pricing looks like? there's no additional charge for AWS Cloud9. So AWS Cloud9 uses an EC2 instance beneath beneath itself. Okay, so you need a Linux server for you to basically set up your. So it can be, so whatever is your EC2 cost, you will pay that price for Cloud9 environment. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a T2.micro and set up Cloud9 on it, so that I can delete it after I make use of it, right? I'll just show you. If you want, you can also do that, but ensure that you delete that EC2 instance so that you can avoid charges at a later point in time. My Cloud9 environment is the name that I'm giving. Just give the description here. I'll just go next steps. Okay, so you can actually create a new EC2 instance, or or you can create a new no ingress EC2 instance for environment, or create or run in a separate server. If you already have an EC2 instance, you can use that to provision this. Okay, let me just go ahead and create a new EC2 instance using T2.micro, which is a free tier, and I'm going to use Amazon Linux. You can use Linux 2 or Linux or Ubuntu. I'll use Amazon Linux 2, which is the latest one. You can also enable a cost saving setting where you can set up an auto hibernate time. If there is no activity, it will just shut down after 30 minutes. Okay, I'll just leave it as it is. And it creates a service linked role for you, IAM role. We were talking about IAM roles, which can have service linked roles, right? You can actually, it creates an automated service linked role on your behalf. Okay, network VPC, network settings. I'm just going to use my VPC. Okay, which is my VPC, and I'll use my subnet 1. Okay, which is a public subnet. I guess so. Let me check quickly. Yeah, it's a public subnet. So let me just check subnet 1 and just say add a new tag. I'll just give name my Cloud9 EC2. Next step. Okay, I'll just say env name. Next step. Yeah, create environment. So it's just gonna take a few minutes for my brand new Cloud9 environment to be ready. So let's just give it a couple of minutes, because it's going to provision the EC2 instance, come back, set up the tools within the EC2 instance, and then tag it with the, yeah, if you see, yeah, so it's just coming up. Yeah, it's running. So let's just give it some time. It's just come up. Yeah, it's connecting to that EC2 instance, and it's setting up that EC2 instance. Okay, cool. The environment is ready. Okay. Now it's a complete full-fledged development environment for you. Everything is on browser. Okay, everything is on browser, and you can change themes and things like that here. And you can create a new Lambda function, or you can create a new file. Here you see /home EC2 and user /environment. That is where your files get stored, right? If you want, you can just create a a new file. Okay, let me create a new file called, let me first go with a very minimalistic thing. I'll create a shell script. Okay, I'll say hello world.sh. Okay, I'll just go here. I'll use one of our shell scripts that we have. Okay, where we used shebang. Let me just go to just go here, copy this, come here and then paste it here. So this is run. So I can just file, save, and I can just run it. Yeah, see, it's running. You see this, it's running, and it's basically printing hello RPL champs. Okay, this is a shell this thing. I can also create a new Python file, hello world.python. Okay, I just do that. So it automatically recognizes that to be a Python. Okay, so let me just go and bring up our Python. Okay, I'll just use just say print okay, so let's see if it, yeah, so it's running it because it knows that it is using Python. I have named it as python.py. It automatically figured out what is the runtime that it is supposed to use. So you can use Python 3. This is Python 3. Similarly, you can use TypeScript, you can use Java, you can write C++, shell. You see, this is shell script. Hello world.sh is shell script. This is a Python. Okay, so that's basically the advantage of this, and and this is just a basic. I mean, you can build more complicated stuff, such as you can link it with your GitHub, right? And you can create a complete Lambda function, and using your Cloud9 environment, just give a function name. Okay, and just give a function name, application name. It will automatically create that Lambda function for you. Okay. Yeah, so there's so much with, I mean, all best part is it's all within the browser, nothing else. I can just simply close this. I mean, come back at some point in time. If I just go to Cloud9, I just go to Cloud9, you will see your environments here. So this is my Cloud9 environment. I'll just open IDE. It will connect to the EC2 instance underlying, and then it will bring up everything. All that, wherever I left, it should be there here. Okay, so that's the beauty of Cloud9. Okay, so I will let you guys explore this. Okay, I'm just going to delete this. I don't need this. Just deleted my environment. Let me just go to EC2 and see if EC2 got deleted. Yeah, EC2 got deleted. Yeah, EC2 is getting deleted. Okay. Okay, cool. So that's Cloud9. So learn about Cloud9. So it's very simple, and it also integrates with all the other AWS services. Okay, that's Cloud9. Uh, so then you have code build and code deploy, code commit, and code pipeline. Okay. Um, you know what? I mean, you can basically, so now when you go into a professional environment, correct? Usually, how companies and how enterprises build their applications, they follow a process to build applications. Okay, it's not that, I mean, because there'll be thousands of developers and hundreds of testers and so many people in a typical software engineering environment, correct? So now, as part of that, what they do is they follow a very strict process around which developer gets access to what. I mean, they'll have a code repository because they have to store the source code and ensure that they have enough backups and ensure that something goes wrong with that. I mean, they should be able to restore it from the backup, right? So now the code repository is a big deal for enterprises. In fact, there are tools like Git, right, SVN, VSS, and Microsoft has got some tools, right? Team Foundation Server and things like that. So they're all used as code repositories to store the source code, right? And then maintain copies of the source code and maintain branches of the source code. Like if you go to Git has got, I mean, if you take one open source project, that open source project will have several branches in it. Okay, so now usually the way it happens is there are branches that are created from the main source code, and those branches are used for all releases. Like I release my version 1.2 of software, right? After that, I mean, I need to basically release a hot fix, right? My users had reported some bugs, and then I'm fixing those bugs. Then I'm releasing a hot fix. So hot fix will be like 1.1 version 1.1. Okay, and then after that, you have a major release coming up, which is 2.2. Again, you might have some several hot fixes for 2.0, which is like 2.1, 2.2, and every day there will be builds happening. Okay, every day the repository will be pulled, and the build server will build the entire source code, and then it will deploy it in the environment. So it will deploy it in production. The actual live system is called the production environment. Okay, whereas if you look at the dev or test environments, they're called non-production lower environments. And there can be multiple lower environments like a development environment, testing environment, which is a QA environment, and performance test environment, where you stress test and you do the performance test of your application to see how your application is behaving. Then you have your UAT environment, user acceptance testing environment. Just before you take your software to live production system, it needs to be tested by the business teams. It needs to be tested by the users, end users. So that's called the actual UAT. UAT, it's called UAT, user acceptance testing. Okay, so there will be an environment for user acceptance testing. So it's basically a pipeline. First, it gets built in development, then it goes to test, then it goes to performance test. From performance test, it gets certified that functionality is good, performance is good. Then it gets promoted to the UAT environment, the user acceptance testing environment. And in the user acceptance testing environment, it is actually tested by actual business users who are going to use that system. So once they certify, then it will be deployed to production and it will be made live, and users can start using the application. I mean, if it is an internet facing application, the internet users would use, or if it's an internal application, internal users would use that application. So this is the software development life cycle, right? So now as part of this life cycle, you need so many discrete environments like dev environment, test environment, UAT, production, pre-production, and so on and so forth, correct? So now in order to have these environments built, right? Obviously, you will use like CDK or you'll use CloudFormation to build all these environments and manage them. But you also need to deploy the application source code into these environments, right? So that's where you need a bunch of tools like Jenkins is being used very popularly these days. Chef is being used very popularly these days, right? And yeah, and you can, and there are tools like SaaS tools are also available, like Circle CI. Circle CI is a continuous integration tool which is used, right? So where every time a developer checks in a code into the source code repository, either Jenkins or Circle CI would immediately get a notification that and developer has checked in his code. So it will automatically do a full build of the source code, and then it will take the latest version of the source code, build it, and then deploy it on the servers, right? And then it will be tested, and then test test cases will be run on the application, like regression. They're called regression test cases. Okay, what is regression test cases? Where you will have, say, an application can do 100 functionalities, correct? So all these 100 functionalities, I mean, used to be tested manually by humans in those days, but today, of course, there are humans still doing testing, but they only write automated test cases, and that it has gone more into an automation story rather than a manual testing story, right? Of course, manual testing do exist on legacy systems, but not on modernized systems anymore, right? I mean, in a modernized system, nobody does manual testing these days. So where it goes for testing, so where if say there are 100 functionalities, all these 100 functionalities can be scripted as automated test cases, where as part of the regression, as part of your regression testing, whenever a new release or whenever a code change is made, all these 100 test cases will be run on the code to see if it passes all the 100 test cases or not. If some test case fails, because you never know, right? Maybe you're making some modifications to a function, right? And that function is called by 10 other classes, correct? So in such cases, it might impact the other classes, other functionalities. So that's why the end-to-end testing has to be done, right? So that, and it gets certified. Okay. Now these are tools that are available, services that are available within AWS, where code commit is a repository, a source code repository within AWS, where you can use code commit to, it's like Git, right? I don't know how many of you have GitHub accounts, right? If not, I would suggest you to first go create a GitHub account. Okay, just first create a GitHub account. Okay, sign up for GitHub. It's free, and you can store your source code in GitHub. Okay, and you can sync your GitHub with your local ID. Okay, GitHub is very, very useful. Or you can also use AWS Code Commit. Okay, Code Commit is primarily for enterprises, who are using AWS and they want a centralized location where they want to store all their source code. And also, it's highly scalable, right? Where if say 100 developers become 1,000 developers, you don't need to worry about the underlying compute infrastructure for your code commit. It will automatically scale because it's a managed service. Okay, it's like a private Git repository. It's not a public Git repository. This is a public Git repository, whereas this is a private Git repository. Okay, so then code build. Code build is a service with which you can build your source code, right? And if you have to build your source code, you need compute power, correct? So now what code build does is it gives you that compute power on a need basis, on demand basis. Whenever you trigger a new build, it will spin up the underlying resources which is required, the compute resources and storage resources. It will build the source code, and then and then it will tear down the environment once the source code is built. Okay, because see, if it is a smaller software, then it's fine. But look at systems, which are very complex, which have got thousands of lines of code or millions of lines of code and several modules and several functions that it does. It's a huge software development effort, right? In such cases, the build activity itself will be a very complicated activity, right? You have to build the scripts that can build your application, and the output that you get out of it will be in several MBs or several GBs. Okay, like the war file or the jar file that you get in Java, right? Will be, or the DLL that you get in .NET programming, right? So those could actually be in several MBs. Okay, so now that's where it becomes tough for you to manage that infrastructure on your own, right? Instead, you use code build to build and test code with continuous scaling and pay only for the build time, right? If your build is running for say 10 minutes, you only pay for the 10 minutes. You don't pay for the rest of the time. Okay, so then you have code deploy, right? Code deploy is where you need to, once you build the code, you need to deploy it to your infrastructure, correct? So what code deploy does is it automates the code deployments to maintain the application uptime, right? So where you don't need to worry about building anything extra to basically go and deploy your code. So these are the three services. Code commit is the repository. Code build will build and test code with continuous scaling. Code deploy will automate the code deployments to your infrastructure. And code pipeline is for basically create a complete end-to-end pipeline. It's called continuous delivery pipeline, CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous delivery. In DevOps, it's all very, very important. You understand these terminologies. It's called continuous integration and continuous deployment delivery, CI/CD. So code pipeline, using code pipeline, you can tie all of these together where you say that if somebody checks in a source code, using code pipeline, you create a workflow of what needs to happen, right? From one stage to another stage, how it has to move, right? For example, from dev to test, you want to promote your code. After it is built successfully in development and deployed in development, it can move it to test environment. But between, you might want a approval stage, right? So where maybe the QA engineer or QA manager has to approve the code to be deployed in the QA environment, maybe as a process, right? You can have all those human processes in the middle, so where you can use those human processes to build a complete pipeline, end-to-end pipeline. Okay, let's just quickly see this small video.
In today's world, your applications must evolve quickly to meet your customers' needs. Improving and releasing software at a fast pace to meet customer needs is at the core of every successful business, making agility and time to market essential to maintaining your competitive advantage. Companies that can rapidly deliver updates, innovate faster, adapt to changing markets more easily, and drive better business results. But quickly delivering updates, such as new features or bug fixes, can be difficult and error-prone using traditional software release processes, where code updates are manually and infrequently moved from development to testing and finally to production. What if the entire software release process were automated, allowing you to test and release code more frequently? Introducing AWS Code Pipeline, a continuous delivery service for fast and reliable application updates. With continuous delivery, your code updates are automatically built, tested, and made ready to deploy. Code Pipeline lets you model, visualize, and automate your software release process.
Having a source repository from Git, it's doing a build, and then it is going to a staging environment, and then from staging
through a simple-to-use graphical user interface or with a command line interface. You model your software release process as a workflow made of different stages, or a pipeline, which
production, correct?
Describes how new code changes progress through your release process. At each stage, you choose the actions that are performed on your code, such as how and where your code is built, tested, and deployed. When your pipeline is active, every code change made to your source repository is automatically pushed through the set of actions you defined, so that code updates are run through a standardized process after every commit. Code Pipeline lets you set manual approvals at each stage of your pipeline, so that approvers can review and then approve or reject updates before they progress down your pipeline. Code Pipeline also automatically stops your pipeline whenever an action fails, such as a unit test failure. This automation allows you to test your code more frequently and catch bugs while they are small and simple to fix. Once your release process has been automated, it becomes easier to build, test, and deploy updates more frequently. This allows you to focus on improving your core product. Code Pipeline is extensible and works with a variety of source code, build, testing, and deployment tools from AWS or third parties, enabling you to use different services in each stage of your pipeline. For example, you can use AWS Code Commit as your source repository or AWS Code Deploy for automated code deployments to your instances. Code Pipeline allows you to invoke custom logic using AWS Lambda during any stage of your pipeline. You can also use popular third-party developer tools via pre-built plugins or create your own custom plugins and actions, enabling you to customize your pipeline to meet your specific needs. Code Pipeline uses AWS Identity and Access Management, to manage who can make changes to your release workflow, keeping your software release pipeline secure. With Code Pipeline, you only pay per active pipeline per month. There are no upfront fees and no setup costs. Get started on AWS Code Pipeline with a few clicks in the AWS Management Console.
Yeah, that's the code pipeline. It's basically a state machine workflow with which you can build your complete life cycle of how you want to release your software and how you want to deploy it, right? So it's very, very important, for making sure that your products are released in a timely fashion and built and deployed in a timely fashion. Yeah, that's code pipeline. So yeah, again, CodeStar is another service which was launched sometime back. Again, this is it's to use quickly build and deploy applications on AWS. It provides a unified user interface, right? And it comes up with other project management dashboards like tracking issues, right? Because it's not just about building software, right? It's all about how the life cycle of the software, like bugs, issues, features and enhancements are tracked using a project management. So CodeStar gives you all of that. Of course, CLI is something that we are aware of. A device farm is where, if you want to test your mobile applications, Android, iOS on real devices in the AWS cloud, you can use your device farm, right? Yeah, tools and SDKs are there. I mean, X-Ray is again another tool which is used to debug distributed applications. Like X-Ray is like when you have a end-to-end, when you have an application, you use X-Ray to capture all the events and understand, what is failing where in a distributed application, right? Imagine a distributed application which has got 20 modules or 20 interfaces, right? What is failing where is something that you can use AWS X-Ray to analyze and debug in the distributed application environment. Okay, and yeah, Code Guru. Code Guru is basically a service which analyzes your code and it gives you recommendations around. It's like a profiler tool, right? I'm not sure how many of you know what a profiler is. Profiler is, I mean, a database has got a profiler. Your Java, .NET, all these programming languages have got profilers, right? Which will analyze your code and tell you, which line of code is more expensive from a resource perspective. If you feel that, your code is running slow, you want to understand which line of code is contributing to that slowness, you can actually use Profiler, and it's basically a profiler service like Code Guru. Okay, it does a memory profiling of your code and it tells you, which line of code is taking how much of CPU cycles and how much of memory cycles. Okay, so these are the things. So takeaways, three key things. One is Cloud Development Toolkit, Cloud Development Kit CDK is very, very important. I would recommend all of you to install CDK and try CDK, right, in your free time. Cloud9 is also an integrated development environment, and the CI/CD pipeline, right, such as your code build, code commit, code deployed, and code pipeline. Okay, you can try all of these. I mean, there are free tiers available even in code pipeline. If you go to code pipeline, I think there is a free tier available. You can just test it out. Yeah, if you see, code pipeline has got a free tier, offers new and existing one free active pipeline each month is available, and there are videos available, right? You can just try that, but ensure that you don't create more than one pipeline because it'll charge $1 per active pipeline per month. Okay. Okay. All right. So I think so these are the things. So I'm just going to give you, or you can just go to AWS, go to products, go to developer tools, click on developer tools. You'll land at this page. So that is the assignment for today. Just go through this, try out Cloud9, try out CDK, right? And do that in your free time. Okay. So now let's switch to our quiz at this point in time. Okay. What I'm going to do is, how many people are there? Let's see, about 70 people, about 65, 70 people are there. All right. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do a quick fun quiz, online quiz, a gamified quiz. Okay. So let's just quickly stop my screen share. Brother Sai Krishna, you want to stop the recording, please?
Sure, Anna. Sure, Anna. Give me a second.
Okay, so let's start the quiz. And what I'm going to give you is I'm going to